Well, I think we cannot talk about this exhibition without spending a little bit of time on what I think is one of maybe the most frontal, disturbing, controversial image and work in the exhibition, which is this very large billboard-like, wallpaper-like work behind me. It's, as I was saying, talking about apex, what's very important when we look at Arthur Jafa's work are the images themselves, the space between the images, and how the images interact with one another. Little bit like the German artist John Ertfeld during the mid-20th century that was doing political collage. In a way, Jafa is doing this kind of, he works like a collage artist. What's interesting in collages is that with a collage, you cut. As a filmmaker, you cut. When you cut, you make a scar. You make a cut, you open a wound. But you interrupt linearity. A cut is an act of violence. And what Jafa is doing with his cuts, with his juxtaposition of images, is an act of violence directed towards or against a monolithic history. Monolithic, a one-direction narrative is interrupting what we think we know. And that interruption is happening just here, where the images meet. Here you have two very obvious images, and as I said, disturbing image. The first one here is a very well-known image. It's a scene of lynching in Duluth, Minnesota, north of the United States. It's a very disturbing image in many ways because you have 3 victims hanging from a pole, and then you have a crowd being proudly photographed in front of what is absolutely unspeakable. This is the continuation of the scars of ex-slave Gordon. It's shocking in so many ways that the audience in these images, the white crowd, is proudly being part of this spectacle of suffering and death. It's shocking because if you know a little bit the history of the United States, Duluth is not in the South, not in the Mississippi, it's in Minnesota. And Minnesota is one of the most politically liberal states in the United States. So if it happens there, just imagine what's happening or what was happening in other states. What's shocking too is it's 1919 or 1920, depending on the source of the images, which means that this image is only 100 years old, only 100 years old. And that's, we're not talking about ancient history here. We are talking about a past that refuses to pass. It's even more shocking that these images of the beginning of the 20th century, we see them over and over again. We see them in other culture right now, in time of war, when we see bodies hanging from poles. So this image, or Nina Simone's song, Strange Fruits hanging from the trees, is unfortunately of still current today, still relevant today. Then you have another image here that Jafa found. I have to admit I don't know exactly the source of this image, but as this one, it's a well-known image. Whether we know the fact or not, it's a well-known image. It could be a gang, an image of a black gang, young African-American people with guns and gesture, gang gesture. But it's also an image of protest. It's an image that says, we don't want that to happen again. It's an image that brings you, if this image brings you to Nina Simone's Strange Fruit, this image brings you to the LA riots, to the hip-hop band NWA. It's an image that found its roots in black nationalism, in the history of the civil rights movement. And again, what we have here, what we have with ex-slave Gordon, what we have with so many images in Apex or in the film Love is the Message and the Message is Death, are images with scars and images that continues today to scar us as well as they are scaring us.